As is usually the case, we can do pretty significant things with basic skills. But then we might choose to take them to the next level and really give ourselves options for elegant documents. Styles are no exception. Word's built-in styles are solid and very useful, but often we want to give our own custom look, or we have specific uses in mind that we need to address. Take our headings in this document as an example. We want them to look like titles, and they do, but we don't necessarily want them to look like the Heading 1 style that came with Word. One option is to go ahead and update the Heading 1 definition to match our formatting instead. We can actually do that very simply, and I'm going to go ahead and do just a couple of things here. Of course, we have to start by selecting the text. Then we'll just make a couple of changes. I think what we'll do is move up and display the dialog box launcher for fonts. We'll give that a click because this has one of my favorite features that I've already mentioned, the checkbox for small caps. I think that when we have headings, they should be in small caps to differentiate from our subheadings. So we'll check that and we'll say OK. The next thing I think that would look nice is to have a line that actually goes across the entire width of the page to differentiate where each of these sections is. A visual division, if you will. We can do that by moving up to the right-hand side of the paragraph group, clicking on the drop-down for the borders, coming all the way to the bottom, and choosing the very last option, Borders and Shading. This opens the Borders and Shading window. Here we can go ahead and make some modifications. For example, we can choose the color that we want, as well as the width. Let's make some choices here that might be good. I kind of like the blue color, so we'll go ahead and choose blue from the bottom. And we want it to be fairly wide, but not necessarily too wide, so let's try 2 1/4 points. Then, of course, we need to apply it, and we can do that from the right side of this window. We can use any one of the buttons to apply predefined, like top, bottom, left, and right, or we can simply click in the little preview itself. I'm going to click at the bottom of the text, saying that we want this to be an underline across the entire bottom of whatever the text selection is. It is important to notice that one of our options here says Apply To, and the default is going to be the paragraph. We could also apply it to the text, but if we did that, the line would only go underneath the text, and that's not what we want in this case. We want it to go across the width of the page, so we'll stick with paragraph. Once we get all of this set, we'll say OK. And we can see that this, of course, has been applied, and now we can go ahead and update our heading to use this particular formatting. This particular method is called creating or modifying styles by example, and to me it's very visual, and I prefer it that way, so this is the way I generally create or modify styles. Now what we can do is simply go up to our gallery, right-click on Heading 1, and we could choose to update Heading 1 to match this selection. If we did that, then the Heading 1 that came with the template would be updated to include our underline and our small caps that it didn't previously contain. I actually do that pretty often, update styles that is, but I do not recommend updating the default styles that come with Word. That's just my personal preference. I don't like to mess with the things that come out of the box, because if somebody else came in and said they wanted Heading 1, they would be surprised if the Heading 1 in this document is different than the one that they expect. Instead, I recommend creating our own custom styles, and then we're free to use it, update it, or even delete it without affecting the styles that came with Word. The easiest and most visual way to do this is basically what we've already done. We formatted our text and our paragraphs, or whatever settings and formatting it is, the way that we want them to look. Then, instead of selecting and updating something, we're actually going to create a new style. We could do this by right-clicking on the selection, or when we right-click here, we see that we have some different options as well. Because we right-clicked on an actual style, we don't see what we want though. So to create a new style, we need to instead expand the gallery out, come almost all the way to the bottom, and say Save Selection as a new quick style. This is going to bring up a very small window that simply asks us to give it a name, which we can certainly do. Since this is for the You Got It training company, and because we want to use this for all You Got It documents, we're going to call it You Got It Heading. Now normally it would be just fine to go ahead and say OK. That's quick and it's easy. However, I want to go ahead and click on the Modify button because I want to show you some of the other options that are available if you create a style from scratch. Let's go ahead and do that now. Notice that this window gives us many more options. Not only can we give it a name, but we also get to see what type of style it is. And for the first time, we get to choose whether we save it as paragraph, character, linked, table, or list. Because this particular one includes both the paragraph and the character styles, the linked style was selected for us, and that one actually is best. We can see that the style is based on heading 1, and this brings up a whole different discussion about how we can link styles. What this means is that anything we have overridden, in this case things like the underline and the small caps, will be stored as part of the style, but the main formatting is coming from the heading 1 style. So, if somebody went in and did update heading 1, say to be a different font, then our style called You Got It heading would also update because it inherits that feature from the heading 1 style. This is actually a very powerful tool, but you need to understand how things are linked together so you're not surprised when changes happen. We'll go ahead and leave this based on heading 1. We also can choose what style we want to be in the paragraph that follows. In other words, when we put a You Got It heading in and we press enter, do we want the style to automatically change? Think about how much formatting time that can save. We're going to say yes, that we would like that to happen. And in our case, for now, we're going to say that after we have a heading, we would like it to go to the normal style because we'll probably follow our headings with body text. Down below you can see any variety of options that we normally have from the font, character, and paragraph settings that work exactly the same way. It's just this time we're saving them as part of a style. We also can see at the very bottom that it tells us in descriptive text what all of the things are that are part of this style. And at the very bottom we can designate if we want to see it in the quick style list as part of our gallery, and if it should be kept locally in this document only, or if it should be added to the template so that all new documents based off of the template will acquire it as well. We're going to go ahead and leave these as they are and simply say OK. And what we can see now is that we have our You Got It heading that is visible in our Styles panel, as well as in our gallery, so we can quickly apply that to any text that we now have in our document. You know what though? We did have some different text that was based on the heading 1 style, and we want to update those. So do you remember our little trick? Well, if we go back to our gallery and we right-click on heading 1, we can see that we still have 3 instances of heading 1 in our document, and we're going to select all 3 of those. We don't care if they're on page 1 or 100, if there is 2 or 200 of them. They'll all be selected. With them all selected, we want to convert those from using the heading 1 style to the You Got It heading. We can do that very simply by first selecting all instances as we just did, then simply clicking the style we want to apply from the gallery. Now everything in our document that we worked with at least thus far should use our brand new You Got It heading instead of heading 1. Let's do one last little thing to show you how all of this can start to come together for full document creation. What we now need to do is work beyond our headings and realize that we also have some subheadings. This page is a perfect example. Below Business Goals and Objectives, we have something called Perpetual Goals. We could start by applying the You Got It heading. We'll click on that from the gallery. But we don't want this to be exactly like a heading, so let's make some changes. First of all, we can remove the bottom border. We'll do so by moving up to our Borders drop-down, and we'll simply say No Borders. We also want to remove the small caps. So we'll go to the dialog box launcher for font, remove that check mark, and say OK. Now I know maybe it seems like we're going in circles a little bit here, because originally we created this heading by moving those things in. Now we're taking them off. The point here is that we want to start with something that is very similar to our You Got It heading, but we want to make it look like a subheading, and we can do that by simply removing those 2 features. Now we want to create a brand new style. We don't want to modify anything, and we could right-click and do a quick style. But my job is to show you different ways to accomplish things, so we'll do that this time by going over to the Styles pane at the bottom, clicking on the New Style button, which is the first one in the series of 3 buttons at the bottom, which brings up the window that we saw just a moment ago. This is actually the window that you'll see if you want to modify a style. We'll call this You Got It subheading. We could again move through and choose what type of style it is, but what we're most interested now is talking about the style based on and style for following paragraph options. It is based off of the You Got It heading, so if we go in and make any changes to that, this one will likewise update. That's a wonderful thing. This is actually where we want to say the next style should be the normal style or body text. We talked about how we have all of these different features that we could work with, and indeed we may want to change some of these. For example, if we move all the way down to the bottom left, there's a Format button that we can expand. Notice that there is currently a lot of space before this paragraph. We may want to adjust that, so we can go to the Paragraph option, which opens the typical Paragraph Features box that we saw when we talked about paragraph formatting, and here we can work with things like indents and spacing. In this case, instead of a 24-point space before, we're going to bring that down and make it be only a 6-point space before. Then we'll say OK. And once we get this set up exactly the way that we want, we can say OK again. And we've just created yet another style, this time using the style pane itself. As one last note, we do have some options in the Styles pane. For example, instead of seeing plain text versions, we can click Show Preview, and this shows us more of a what you see is what you get. I prefer this. We can also disable the use of linked styles, and if we click on Options, we can actually get a whole window that designates how we want to see things here. For example, do we only want to see styles that are recommended? And we'll talk about how we can do that later on. We can also see styles based on paragraph level formatting and/or font formatting and/or bulleted and numbered formatting. So here we really can see a lot of different features that disable or enable things that we see in this list to make it more simple or more complex, or maybe I should say more in-depth. Just remember, if you're not seeing the styles that you think you should be, you might want to come into these options and designate exactly what you want to see in this particular styles pane. With that said, can you see why I sometimes think that people make styles seem more difficult or advanced than they have to be? I think that that's a little bit humorous because styles certainly can be complex as far as what they contain, but they are far from complex to create, apply, and even modify. Everything is immediately available either from our Styles gallery in the ribbon or from the Styles pane on the right-hand side. And once we understand that and start working with the styles, I think they become something very simple that we should be using every day. Once that happens, we often think back and go, why did I ever think styles were difficult? They really aren't. And boy, look at all the stuff that we can do with them and the ease with which we can format our documents once